Welcome to the Strong Enough Podcast, your relationship wellness podcast. I'm your host, Claudia. Today's guest grew up with a level of abuse and trauma that many of us cannot understand or even fathom. But he's done the hard work and continues to do so in order to heal himself. And he's going to share with us what that took and how he now has a happy, healthy, successful relationship. Please help me in welcoming Forrest Lang. Forrest, thank you so much for joining me here today. You have such a story to tell. I'm not going to say amazing because we talked about that, but you have a crazy, wonderful story to tell. And there's so much we could talk about, but I want to start by talking just a little bit about you, your background, what brought you here today. So I know, first off, you're a veteran. Thank you so much for your service.
Thank you for your support.
Absolutely. You are a tattooer now. And I do have to ask real quick, though. So I feel like we've gone from tattoo artist to tattooer. Is that a decision that you guys as tattooers made? Because I like to call you artists, but that doesn't seem to be in anymore.
Well, yeah, I don't know when that started for me. I don't think that we say a painter artist or
Okay, fair.
sculptor artist. So I think, I'm not offended by somebody saying tattoo artist. I just call myself a tattooer.
But I think everybody does now, or it seems like all the artists, all the tattooers that I see or know or hear talking, like it's now tattooer. So I'm going to stick with that.
I didn't even know that. I don't hang out with a lot of other tattooers, or I'm not in with the in crowd. So that's kind of cool to know that. Thanks for telling me.
Yeah, absolutely. You are the in crowd. So whatever. And in addition to all these other things, you are also a published author now. You have recently...
Not published yet.
Okay.
Published.
Well, I feel really honored. Okay.
No. Yeah. So what I did, I don't really have a need to, I already have an income and a career, right? And I'm not going to turn down money if it comes my way. I'm not that way, but I don't need it from the book just yet. So anybody who I can reach and give that book to, I give it to them. When the time comes to publish it, I will publish it and sell it through, one of the publishing houses. But for now, I don't see a need to self-publish. And I use lyrical content in that. And those people who hold the copyright to that are very, very guarded about that. And I'm committed to do the book the way I wrote it, which includes lyrics like from Stevie Nicks. Mm-hmm. The light that shines through the shining night is a lamp that I carry from my mother's home, and the light that burns through the window pane and the love remains. I'm a Gen Xer, man. Music meant everything to me. And so it's a real pain in the ass finding the right people to even ask if they'll even respond, whether or not I can use their lyrics. So that's something that I'm also working on before I will ever sell that book to anybody.
I have to tell you, that was honestly one of the very first things that I picked up on and connected with when I read your book. That was the lyrics at the start of every chapter, because I am super connected to music as well. I think I told you a little bit about that. I have gone through some struggles in my life, and some of them were as recent as just a few years ago. And when I was really at my lowest and didn't want to wake up in the morning, there were some songs and bands and music that kept me alive and going and really spoke to my soul. So I loved that, and I felt like that was an immediate connection. So thank you for doing that and putting those lyrics like throughout the book. I thought that was amazing.
When it really the music does belong to us. I mean, specifically, everybody has a connection to music somehow or other, but my generation, we placed a lot of our identity around the music that we listened to, because music was expensive then, and you couldn't just stream on a magic supercomputer in your pocket whatever you wanted to listen to at any moment. It cost money to go buy the cassette or the CD, like $20. That was a lot of money. So, I chose metal and I bought that genre of music. because we could really only afford one, most people back then.
Absolutely.
And I spent a lot of time, we were talking about being in an enclosed space where it's, maybe safe and quiet. When I was a kid, I in my foster home, I spent a lot of time in the closet, in the hallway with the door closed, listening to Metallica or the Eagles or Megadeth or Skid Row. I mean, I was into a lot of glam bands when I was in my early teens. What do you call that when you're a tween, and I spent a lot of time escaping, listening to music and just drifting away in it, because my life was very painful and I needed that. And when I was living on the streets and, Bad Religion was in my headphones, or Ice Cube or Nas, or, all that music that I really connected to, it was a companion for me when there wasn't a companion.
I felt like your musical interests were very diverse, in reading about a lot of the different bands that you listen to, and even just now saying Ice Cube and Nas and Stevie Nicks, and it was very cool. What inspired you to write the book now or recently? What was the driving factor that really led you to that place at this point?
I spent a large part of my life in tremendous pain. My first 27 years were very painful. I had spent my childhood years getting beat up, molested. I would describe it as severe human suffering, right? Because there were a lot of components that went into what made that painful. And there wasn't any one thing I could put my finger on and say, this happened. It was a combination of all of it. But then I had some very significant, for me, tragedies happen in my life. And I believed that it was like a curse over me or something, that, everything I would do would always just turn to shit. And my life turned around in the war in Iraq. And when I came home, I started to believe that maybe I could have a good life, especially after my daughter was born. And at that point, I decided that I wanted to tell my story. And I started telling my story through, just giving talks and sharing with other people. And then after 2015, when the world took a turn for me again, I passed through the suicide curve that a lot of us go through between 35 and 45. That's when most men commit suicide that are going to. I once again started sharing again and volunteering again, but I didn't really feel like I had enough to say to write a book. And maybe 4 years ago, I was going through another personal growth program course, and I realized the amount of work that I had done, and that there's a possibility that I may be able to inspire others like me, because I've been able to be of service to so many other people who have similar experience, that I felt like I had developed enough of a good life that I had something positive to say that was worthy of putting forth. And that's when I started writing. And it was very painful to do so. I didn't realize how much that was going to hurt to write that book. But I did not do it out of a cathartic or therapeutic reason at all, because I didn't feel that it was therapeutic to relive all of those things. I did it out of service, and it turned out to be therapeutic in the end.
That was actually going to be one of my questions, because a lot of people do find writing to be therapeutic. And I know in a lot of different programs, whether it's a recovery or a 12-step or just, going to sex assault retreats or all kinds of different things, writing is often a huge part of it, because so many people do find it to be therapeutic. So I was going to ask if it was. So what kept you going in the time when it was really super painful to write all those words? What kept you going? Was it just, I'm doing this really to help others?
No, it got to be because I finished. I fucking finished, and that's why I did it. It stopped being about anybody else, At some point, I wanted to stop. It was destroying me. I felt like it was destroying me. It was affecting my relationship with Kristen, my relationship with my daughter, with my friends, with work. Writing that book was consuming big parts of my life and my hell. And I finished it because I fucking finish. And that was the only reason. I just had to finish.
And it's amazing. I mean, I have to tell you, and I told you this already. I normally, when I read a book, I read the first 2 chapters, I skip to the end, I read the last couple pages, because if I die, I want to know what happens in the book. I read your book cover to cover, practically in one sitting, because it was fantastic to see everything that you went through from a young age to today, but how you persevered and how you decided that you weren't going to be a victim anymore. So I want to talk about, I mean, there's so much we could talk about in your life and the things you've gone through. But what I really would like to talk to you about is Kristen and the relationship, that you guys had several years ago when you first met to now when you're in what I think is a really loving, healthy, successful relationship, and how you got there. So for the people that haven't read your book yet, can you tell them a little bit about how you guys met?
Sure. Yeah. So I'd just been home from Iraq, maybe a little over a year. My daughter was only 6 months old. Things hadn't worked out with her mother. And I was just single and having fun. And I didn't really want to hang out with dudes because they were really aggressive and made loud noises. And I just wasn't feeling that for a while after Iraq. I was a line corpsman, and I'm not a killer. I'm not a badass. I'm not a special forces, Navy Ninja Turtle or anything like that. I was a standard ground line corpsman. But even being a standard, like regular infantry person in a war is traumatic, and it is a terrific and terrible thing. And it affected me in ways that I didn't even understand. But I didn't want to hang out with any men. And I was hanging around with girls who were in recovery. And, Kristen, I was 28 and she was 19. And I wasn't trying to have a girlfriend. I was just hanging out and having a good time. And we started just, I guess, casually dating, you could call it. I used to take her and drop her off on dates with her boyfriends and then pick her up and take her home, And something happened at some point where we developed attachment to each other. And the thing I'll say that's different about her and any other relationship I've been in is I had no butterflies in my stomach for her. I had no chemical attraction to her. It happened on accident. And for me, when I believe that when we feel butterflies in our stomach and chemical attraction to another person, they are very similar to our caregiver of the sex that we are attracted to, right? And I don't want to be anywhere near anybody who I have a chemical attraction to, because that means that they are toxic for me. Maybe they're not a bad person. I don't think my biological mom is a bad person. She's a child abuser and she's a very sick person, but I don't have anything for her. There's no room for her in my life. There's no room for people like her in my life. And my mom was a musician. She was kind of a badass. She was a sex worker. She was a hippie. She was counterculture, and then flipped into this hyper religious, extremist, racist personality, and sometimes would flip back and forth. And so the people that the females that I would be chemically attracted to most likely are going to have components like that. So the way I met Kristen was on accident. And I fell in love with her slowly, and I didn't want to admit that I loved her, and I didn't want to admit that I needed her. And we stayed together for 10 years that way. And I treated her like a piece of property. I financed her life. I was tattooing and making pretty good money, and she was going to college, and I told her what to do. I bossed her around. I felt that she owed me something, and I treated her like shit, and I emotionally abandoned her. Now, mind you, every relationship has good and bad parts, right? Like I'm sure that you've been in bad relationships where you had a good time sometimes, right?
Absolutely.
And where we like things about the person, and there are things that are working very well, right? But it only takes one stab, right? And you've stabbed somebody. So I was in a place where I was still very much coming from a place of victim mentality. You don't understand what I've been through. I can do whatever the fuck I want because bad shit happened and you wouldn't understand. I don't need to be faithful because if I am, that puts me in a place where you have some kind of power over me and you're not fucking me every night and I'm paying all the bills. So that makes me a chump. So I might as well go out and cheat because nobody takes advantage of me. Like that kind of thinking, right? And she left me. She never found out I was cheating on her. But she knew all the other stuff, right? Everybody knows when they get emotionally abandoned. Everybody knows when they get treated like shit. Everyone knows that when there's somebody who's in a power dynamic where a person is lording power over the other person, right? And we broke up. And I was still pretending like I wasn't hurt and I didn't need her. And it took some work. It took some work on my part to undo that particular programming around relationships. And I mean, how could I not have love and intimacy problems, right? Like, and I'm not saying that as an excuse, but how could until I deal and face that stuff? I mean, my brother started molesting me when I was 4. Other shit happened before that, right? That is very foggy, so I didn't put it in the book. And then I got out of that situation, and my foster mom, this 38-year-old lady, when I was 12, had a relationship with me in her home. She was married with 2 other kids my age. I mean, how could I not be just zapped, right? Like, just totally fucked up. And I feel like I'm talking too much and you're not getting any words in. Or am I doing this right? You know?
You're absolutely doing this right, because I think of things that I want to ask, and and you're just rolling through and you're talking about them. So you can keep going, or I can throw in a question. It's up to you.
I don't want to run you over. You know,
No.
like sometimes I get excited and I'm like, blah, you know.
I like it. Well, so I will ask you a question then. I want to go back to what you said about your mom and how she changed, kind of from one way to a polar opposite. Did that change affect your feelings about religion growing up and now?
Religion was really hard for me when I was younger. And it's still a little triggering. Now, not Christianity. She was a born again Christian who had I don't know if it's like I don't know if it's called a very particular doctrine where there's a lot of elements of white supremacy, elements of the world is going to end, elements of governmental conspiracy. That I guess it's like a culture, right? Like a culture that's found in some forms of religion. I don't know what that's called, but when her and my stepfather laid me and my sibling across that picnic bench and it hit me so hard that it fucked me up forever. Like my back got fucked up forever while she read the Bible in some weird kind of like sick religious child beating ceremony. It did make religion repulsive for me. And I'm better now. I respect everybody's religion. I have good, dear friends that are Christian, that are saved, that believe in Jesus. And at the same time, I'm also a member of AA, right? And sometimes the culture of AA can be religious and judgy. And when any culture gets that way, I get a little bit repulsed. I do. And so I don't think that I just don't enjoy being a part of any kind of fervent extreme religion.
And that makes perfect sense. Do you feel like it was hard for you when you first started AA? Because I know I'm familiar enough with it and in reading your book that you're supposed to give yourself to a higher power. For a lot of people, that is a god of some sort. And I know that wasn't really your thing. And so your higher power just became AA in itself, or like what were you giving? What was your higher power that you gave yourself to get through AA?
I called it the dude at first. When I got there, I would talk to the dude. Um, and it worked over time. I'm okay with the word God today. I believe that every word that I say is a prayer. I believe that the power of human speech is a superpower, right? And I think that all the religions are right, and they're all full of shit, right? So I don't think that it's, as humans, I don't think it's our business to really truly understand what happens after this human experience is over. I think that might ruin the show. So I'm okay with not knowing. I'm comfortable with ambiguity and paradox. I have tolerance for that. I maintain an open mind, and I haven't made a decision yet.
And that's okay, right?
Yeah.
So you find Kristen, and you guys kind of are in that weird space for a long
10
period of
years.
time. I know that you said you knew you couldn't live without her, um, at a point, but you were still not healed, or you were not better. You had not dealt with some of the issues that you had as a child that turned into relationship issues. Being vulnerable
Mm-hmm.
was really hard. Being monogamous was really hard. So in your mind, how did you write those two things, that this is the person that I do love, I care about, I would die without her, but I can't really be 100% honest. I can't be vulnerable. I can't really be monogamous. How in your mind did you have those two things simultaneously?
I justified it. I justified everything that I did wrong. And I surrounded myself with people who would agree with me. If anybody disagreed with me, I pushed them away, right? As a very wounded person would do. And I didn't rectify that stuff until a couple of years after she was gone. I mean, when she left, she finished college and got an opportunity to be on her own and get rid of the asshole, even though she loved me, right? I was an asshole and we were unhappy. And man, I was just so victimized by that. And I still was so afraid to even admit that abandonment hurt me. That's how bad I suffered from abandonment, right? Like when somebody's abandoned by their caregiver when they're a kid, it creates a wound, man, that, I by myself, I would think, what the fuck is wrong with me? I see other people go through breakups and they're fine. It's like, I feel like there's just everybody I love died and I'm just, it was bad. And, I had psychosis. I had, homicidal thoughts, suicidal thoughts. I almost did take my own life after she left. And after a little bit of time, right, of healing, of getting an opportunity to realize that there wasn't anything wrong with me, that the reactions I was having were normal. What the fuck is wrong with me? Nothing. All of my reactions are normal circumstances, like normal responses to abnormal circumstance, to trauma, to traumatic experience, right? And that was like, oh, okay, maybe I'm not a total psycho and I don't belong in the loony bin. Maybe I'm wounded. And maybe if I'm wounded, I can heal. And when I went through Save a Warrior, the 5-day initiatory process, that's available to you. It's available to all current, former military, law enforcement, first responder, even foreign militaries go through that type of work. Initiation did something for me, did something that I can't really put into words, do, you got a pretty good idea of what the initiation process was by reading the book, right?
Yes. It was super cool to me. The whole process in that 5 days, as I was reading it, I felt like I was there in a way. And it felt like it would be so therapeutic. And I know that's probably not even a word strong enough to explain it, but it looked like it would be life-changing.
Well, and it's something that human beings just used to do. We've only been living inside for 10,000 years, right? So human beings, if we believe scientists, right, we've been here for 200,000 or 300,000 years as like Homo habilis, or basically what we are, right? And so for 290,000 years or so, human beings used to naturally initiate their boys. The requirements for initiation are to be held in a space considered important or sacred, to be guided by elders or those to be considered of elder wisdom, in a closed container, meaning the participant only really sees themselves, other participants, and leaders. We face our own death, and we get a transitional object. That particular combination of ancient technology that human beings just knew how to do, when it happened for me, my psyche changed. Parts of me will never be the same after that. And it is all positive improvement. And that closed the gap for me with relationships. It closed the gap, and I realized that in a way I had never grown up. I was a walking man boy looking for mama's approval and rebelling against mama in relationships, leaning on mama to make me a sandwich and cut the crust off for me, and wanting her approval. And that's a disservice to me, and it's a disservice to my partner. Right. And then spending some time unraveling that. I was doing some work with a female in AA who was a good friend of mine, helping me go through the step work around that stuff. And she's like, Forrest, if you call women bitches one more time, you're going to have to leave my house. So I had to undo a lot of things, just training, old training that doesn't serve me.
How do you feel like you move past that state of victimhood, especially as related to your relationship? So you spent that 5 days and you went through that process and it was transformational, but was it like a switch being flipped, or is it still a process that you have to go through? Do those feelings still creep in?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Old training, of course, it creeps in. Old habits, right? The big thing for me now is fidelity, right? That is a deal breaker for my relationship, for any relationship that I want to be a part of. Now, some people have different ideas on relationships, and I'm not going to judge them. Some people are open and whatever. But for me, for the relationship that I want with a person who I love, I must maintain fidelity. And if I don't, it's similar to drinking, taking that first drink, right? And that's something that is just a no matter what. And so I don't look for that type of validation from anybody except myself anymore. I am not going to melt if you tell me that I'm good looking. If you tell me that, oh, wow, I'm doing such a great job with all these, I don't need you. It's nice to hear. That's fine. I don't reject that. But I give that to myself today, right? The majority of the work, and it might sound overly simple, right? But the majority of the work for me is what I say to myself in the shower every morning. I say the opposite of whatever negative thought it is that comes into my head. And that way, I don't need somebody else to do that for me anymore.
It sounds so easy.
Yeah, that's not
but it can't be.
No. Have you ever moved?
Way too many times. I hate moving.
Okay. How much shit do you have when you start to move compared to when you decided to move?
I always have way too much shit. Like it's
Yeah,
just a problem.
but when we move, we finally really do see everything in the room,
Mm-hmm.
right? I don't notice half the shit in the room because it's always been there. And it's the same with those voices in my head. The voices that are consistently shooting bullshit. I've got a committee, right, of just old programming.
Mm-hmm.
Now, luckily, my daughter, her committee sounds a lot better than mine because her programming from me has been positive. And I'm very grateful for that. And that's how we break the cycle, right? That's how we destroy trauma bonds that carry through generations, or at least tear parts of them down. What happened to me happened, and now I have a practice to mitigate what happened, and I get better at it as I go.
So when you and Kristen had that first split, you were still really in that state of victimhood, and you had people surrounding you who were telling you what you wanted to hear, and kind of codependent, I guess, in a way. Was there any part of you that almost felt relief or comfort because you didn't have to fight with her or with those feelings, and having the some people that were honest with you when you didn't necessarily want them to be?
At first, it was just pain. You know, it was all it was pain for me for a while, and I'm not really like proud to say that a breakup almost killed me, and that I am very vulnerable in that area because I have a giant abandonment wound. That's not a fun thing for a dude to say, right? Like, we want to be like, oh yeah, I'm tough, I got this, it's no big deal. I'm the purpose seeker, I'm the savage warrior, right? Like, that's the thing that I would rather portray, but it's not the fucking truth, right? And if I don't share the truth for me, it doesn't make it okay for other guys or girls to share the truth. I mean, we copy each other when we lie, right? When we hide. And it was hard to unravel. It was really tough. And it took me about a year to even really start doing that work. You know, I was just angry and upset for a little while. I didn't speak to her for 2 years. You know, I was all done.
Which makes sense in your state and how you felt. So first off, I'm impressed that you were willing to look inward. It's so hard, I feel like, for people to have that self-awareness and that introspection and to look at what's wrong with us. So many times it is easier to stay in that place of, no, you don't know what I've been through. You don't know why I do what I do. You can't possibly understand. Do you feel like you owe it to people because you have opened up, you are trying to break the stigma because, it's hard to talk about abuse of any kind. It's really hard for men to talk about abuse. It's even harder for men to talk about abuse from another male. So it's just there that you have all these levels stacked. But you're speaking out about it. So at this point, now that you're doing it, do you feel like, okay, I got to keep doing this because I'm trying to break down that stigma. I'm trying to make it okay to talk about.
I don't feel like I owe it to anybody. I enjoy it. I mean, I've always been a little sarcastic and a little bit of an arguer, right? Or I like to just throw a little salt on some bullshit that I see, right? And I mean, for example, I have nothing against people who are different, right? Whatever the difference is, be it religious, be it sexual orientation, be it gender or gender identity or whatever, be it political, be it race, whatever the thing is. And I was hanging out with this group of people one time, and they're all like tough biker dudes and stuff and whatever. And I was talking about something, and one of them called me a faggot, right? Because I'm just talking how I talk. And I said, man, like, I haven't had a dick in my mouth since I was 9 years old, but thanks for bringing it up, bro. Like, all good. I guess I'm a faggot. You know what I mean? Like, I don't care. Like, what are you going to say to me? What are you going to do to me that hasn't already been done? And I've always had a strong sense of justice. And I think that a lot of people who went through, who lived in poverty or who had some kind of wrong done to them, be it by a group of people, or they perceived from a system, or by a individual, I believe most of them do have a strong sense of justice. Like, it becomes more important, right? And I feel called and I feel driven to do what I'm doing in the arena that I'm doing it. I don't give a shit about your politics. I'm sorry. I don't care if you're a libtard or a conservative Trumper or a whatever. I don't give a shit. You know what I mean? Because that's not my business. And it's not the message that I'm here to be about. If I was running the world, I would stop the kids from getting hurt. I can't do that. But what I can do is be a voice for those who have been wounded, right? That it's possible to recover. We don't have to end up OD'd on the street, in prison, underground from suicide or overdose or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. It is inspiring what you do. And hearing how difficult it was for you to write the book, how does that compare or contrast to how it is to talk about what you've been through? Because I know that you've talked about it a lot. You've been on other podcasts. You're definitely not afraid to share your story. Does it get easier to share it? Is it like writing the book for an hour every time you do this? How does it feel for you?
It's easier, of course. The more I spit it out, the easier it is. There were parts of that book that I couldn't read out loud. I read it out loud over and over to people until I didn't cry anymore while I was reading it, right? Because I feel that I have more power when I've processed, right? And I have more power to share. There's still sometimes somebody will get me. Somebody will get me in the feels, like an old friend of mine, a message. People have been coming out of the woodwork, man. My old roommate from the group home hit me up on Facebook like 4 days ago. One of my friends from when I was first getting sober hit me up yesterday, and this person said they had left after Thomas died. For the listeners that don't know, I had a negligent discharge on April 17th of 2001, and my dear friend died in my arm. It was an accident that I caused. And after that happened, this person said that they moved away and became briefly addicted to meth and then got clean. Which I thought that's like a funny sentence to hear.
Right.
But this person said, wow, you must have felt really alone at that time. And that kind of hit me, right? I was like, oh, well, yeah, I did feel alone. I was 24 years old, charged with murder, and then acquitted in a jury trial, and homeless in Los Angeles. I did feel alone, but I never really was. I don't want to get too far off track from what your question was. But relationships were always, for a very long time, a fucking disaster in my life. And I have friends on both sides of relationships like this, right? So friends who were dating the person who had the trauma, and then vice versa, friend trauma dating somebody. And a lot of times, we can bring out the worst in each other. And it took some time for me to be able to heal myself enough to accidentally run back into Kristen and realize that when she was gone, it's such a cliche, right? You don't know what you got till it's gone. But I was away from her for 2 years, and anytime I would meet somebody and think about dating them or come across, whatever, I would always compare them to Kristen, and it wouldn't measure up. It just wouldn't measure up. And I decided that I was just happy alone. But and not like, oh, I'm so just sad and alone old man. No, I was really happy alone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I was getting laid once in a while and doing my job and doing what I wanted. And I was cool by myself, having my friends around and just riding my motorcycle a bunch and stuff. But every time our lives intersected, I just felt this crazy, like the pull had changed. The pull wasn't the butterflies. I felt a strong pull towards her, like a real love,
And that was something different for you.
Absolutely.
So was it scary to feel that after you'd done the work and you ran into her again? How scary was it to go back into a relationship with her in a different space?
It wasn't really scary at all. Yeah, it wasn't. The only thing that was tough, I had a little bit of, I was nervous about moving in with her. Gracie is little, and I didn't want, just in case it didn't work out, I was concerned about somebody coming in and out of my life in that way. And I was nervous about that, but it worked out. It's been, a little over 4 years, and we're doing pretty good.
So what would you say is the hardest part now? So now you have a thriving, healthy, happy relationship. What's the hardest part of that for you?
Well, the hardest part is life, right? Life happens. We get busy. I get busy. She gets busy. We drift apart. And a relationship really is very similar to a plant. If we don't water the plant, it's going to start to wither. And so consistency, right, is very difficult. Getting that date night in, like taking that time to connect every day, taking that time to turn toward each other and talk about what we appreciate about each other, what we love about each other, finding out what it is that each other wants, right? Like she tells me that one of the best feelings she gets is when I hold her and tell her everything's going to be okay. And she likes that. So I do that, I like different stuff. I like, my shoulders rub while I'm watching an action movie, so, and being willing to meet each other and to give. I really liked what John said about both sides giving 100%. That's exactly accurate. I give 100%, she gives 100%, but not always, right? Like sometimes we get tired. We can't always be 100% all the time. There's times when I'm giving 70 and she's giving 40 and I'm giving 30 and she's giving 80. But we get to continually work on it.
Yeah, which I think is so important because for some people you dip to that 40 or 30 and it feels easier to give up and just, oh, I guess it's just not working. It's not worth it. So what continues to make it worth it for you and for Kristen?
I mean, that's really hard to say because I'm happy both ways, right? Like I'm happy, healthy single, and I'm happy, healthy relationship. I don't believe in fairy tales, right? I think that life is messy and it is what it is, but I'm here. This relationship is in front of me. I care very deeply about Kristen, and I believe it is good for both of us to be together with each other. And human beings, we're never really going to be complete, right? Like we long for this completion, like, and that I don't think that happens till we die. We'll always be a half, I'll be, a man in this life. I don't mean to get into fucking with anybody's politics with that shit either. You know what I mean? But, she will be a woman in this life. And, bonded, yeah, we feel some sense of completion and connection in that way. But there will always be some component of that missing, some component of completion. So, but it's a lot more fun side by side with her. Life is a lot more full with her in it.
That's so cool. You mentioned fairy tales, and I try not to believe in those either. But what that made me think of was what I consider a pretty unique perspective that you have. So it's very cliche, and I know I've said it a million times myself of, well, I don't regret anything I've been through because I just wouldn't be the person I am today without it. But you don't agree with that. You've made it pretty clear that like, no, I don't wish everything that happened to me had happened to me because it really sucked at times.
Yeah.
And it does. And when you said that, like, I'd honestly never thought of it, but it makes so much sense. So when you think about that, do you think, because here you are today, you're the Forrest that you are, you do what you do, you inspire people, you're an amazing tattooer, you are now an author. So you're all these things. And I don't want to say because of what you went through, but that definitely impacted who you are today. So would you want to be a different Forrest having not gone through those things? Or do you just say, okay, I don't have to wish I did go through those things, but here I am and I'm dealing with it.
So first I'll say that regret is an emotion. Regret is not a choice. Okay. I don't have say in the emotions that I feel. I can manage them, right? And I can manage the thoughts that come after the primary emotion. But regret is not something that people just don't do, right? It's like, well, I just don't get sad. I just don't get angry. That's bullshit,
Yeah, that'd
right?
be amazing, right?
Well, I mean, maybe not. Maybe we'd turn into robots if we were that way. And as far as um, any of that stuff making me into who I am, and if trauma created strong people, if trauma created superheroes, why wouldn't we just go ahead and hurt kids to make them into superheroes, right? Why wouldn't we just justify abandoning our children and allowing them to get, beat up and raped and starved? Oh, because it's going to make them tough. The reality is most people who've been through things like this are not sitting where I'm sitting, and we don't talk to most of those people. A lot of those people are dead. And I can tell you from experience, my friends that I grew up with, people who have come across in recovery, I can't count them on this many fingers, right? There's more than this that are gone, just people that I know. So no, none of that shaped me into anything good. What benefited my life was the work that I chose to do that was offered to me afterwards, right? So there was the whole collective knowledge of humankind, right? Observed by some aspects of it by people in my life who chose to share that with me. And I chose to listen and apply it, right? So personal growth makes us thrive, makes us shiny, and some people choose to do that without a trauma. A lot of people do, and I don't like in the personal growth field arena this really arrogant, victim-y old story that I've never met anybody who's a really great person who didn't have bad things happen, right? I know plenty of people that are great people that didn't have all that bad shit happen to them. Irrelevant. I can't change it, right? Mm-hmm. If I could, yeah, maybe I would have been a douchebag if I had like a perfect life growing up, or maybe I would have become the president of the United States. Who knows? You know what I mean? That's just a bunch of speculative shit. But where I assign meaning for me and for you is for the work that we've done, right? Makes us who we are. I'm the sum of what I choose to be,
I love that.
Thank you.
It's just, to me, it is so much better than the old cliche, because I've said that so many times. And even as I'm saying it, I'm thinking in my head, no, I'm not glad that stuff happened to me. It really sucked. It really super sucked. So it was really awesome to see a different perspective, and one that actually makes sense that I can feel good repeating and have some good emotion attached to it for sure.
Well, and
So,
there's no way I couldn't feel regret. I took a life. It wasn't on purpose. It was an accident, but I would be a fucking asshole if I said I didn't regret that. I'd be a liar, you know? How could I not regret something so horrible like that, man? I mean, it's still, that still affects so many people. Human life is valuable. And, it wasn't in a combat zone or in some kind of, it was a fucking stupid accident. And he didn't deserve to die. There was no reason he should have died that day, other than I made a dumb decision that I forgive myself for. I forgive myself and I love myself, but I also feel regret. I regret that happened,
how hard has it been for you to forgive others and yourself for what happened? And then which do you think was harder?
Well, I think the hardest thing first was figuring out what forgiveness is, right? Because people talk still today about forgiveness. I looked it up in the dictionary, so I know what it means now. We forget about the dictionary, right? So when people talk about forgiveness, we talk about, okay, let's talk about forgiving a pedophile, right? How in the fuck could you forgive a pedophile? Well, what does forgiveness mean, right? Does it mean reunification with this person? Does it mean that it is okay? Does it mean that you think it's good for them to do that again and you're not worth being protected and neither are other children? No. What forgiveness means is that I clear resentment and I abandon revenge. I can only be resentful at somebody. I can only be resentful at somebody for something that I see in myself. And resentful is lingering, carryable hatred. It's different than being wounded. It's different than, having dislike for somebody or feeling repulsion. It's this very much like in traffic. You motherfucker, you cut me off. The reason I'm mad at that person is because I also cut people off. When I stop cutting people off, I will no longer be angry at the person who does that, right? So clear resentment, anything in the mirror to this person, and then abandon revenge, right? Revenge is not justice. Revenge would be me going and putting a bullet in the brain of whoever did that to me, right? That is not justice. Justice is carried out by our justice system or by our community or by whatever else. It's not an individual thing. So if I choose not to seek revenge and I clear resentment, that is forgiveness. That's all it is. It's not some big fucking parade of like, let's hang out together and reunify and everything's okay and I love you. Doesn't mean that. So yes, absolutely, it's harder to forgive myself because I'm with me all the time. If I was hanging out with pedophiles all the time, it would be very difficult for me to forgive them. I just don't hang out with them, right?
And that's probably a good decision.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go to prison for being a serial pedophile killer. You know what I mean? Like, that would kind of suck. I have other shit to do. But I'm with me all the time. So the way I forgive myself is to stop punishing myself, right? What's the opposite of punishing myself? Feeding myself food, giving myself exercise, giving myself sleep, giving myself a break, allowing myself to have a good time, going and seeing that therapist, getting to the gym, going out and off-roading, doing all these things, right? Making responsible decisions with my life that give the best outcome for me and everyone else around me. And it's a conscious choice to do that. And it goes against what I was trained to do, what my parents trained me to do. My parents trained me to hate. They trained me to destroy. They trained me to live in poverty and have a shit life. And that's not what I want to do. So I get to rewrite the programming.
Which is the best part, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we all do.
What would you tell somebody that is struggling to forgive? So whether it's to forgive themselves for something, to forgive somebody else for a trauma, and they're really struggling with it, what's the first step in your mind to making it happen?
To understand what it is, right? To clear the resentment and abandon, stop punishing. Now, punishing, and I've got to say this again, revenge is individual, right? if somebody hurt you, right? If do not allow your voice to be silent, right? It is not revenge to, like, let's say somebody in your family dynamic was molesting you and you're a kid and you speak up about it to heal. That is not revenge. That is you healing, right? That is something that you have to do. Like you must do that if you want to live, if you want to stop other people from doing that. But please don't go get a gun and shoot them in the head, because that hurts you, right? Revenge doesn't make anything better. It doesn't. The first, I don't know, it depends on the situation. You know what I mean? For something as deep of a wound as getting sexually assaulted, I think the first step is probably getting a good counselor and taking it easy on yourself, and surrounding yourself with people that love you and care for you. I don't even think any first step has anything to do with forgiveness. I think if a person comes up to me and socks me in the face, my face is going to hurt for a minute. It's going to take me a while to process that whole thing. You know what I mean? I think forgiveness is a later on down the road type of thing to worry about, and if a person is seeking forgiveness, right, I think they should really look into what it means, what it actually fucking means, instead of what every asshole, don't even believe me, right? Figure out what it means for yourself and then look at it, because there's a lot of misunderstanding around what forgiveness is.
I think that's incredibly true. And I love what you said, though, about really putting forgiveness to the side or in the back seat for a minute and taking care of yourself. Because if you don't do that first and foremost, then you might not make it to the point of even being able to forgive.
Fake forgiveness is worse than not forgiveness. You know what I mean? It really is. Like, don't do that shit before you're ready. Please.
That's the best piece of advice I've heard, for sure, is don't do it before you're ready. I think that's really meaningful for a lot of people, because we often feel pressured, whether it's even just from ourselves, because that's the thing. Oh, forgiveness is for you. It's not for the other person. And so I think sometimes we do feel like, okay, I gotta get there. I gotta forgive. So I'll feel better. But if you're not ready,
you might even be forgiving without even knowing it, right? If
mm-hmm.
just not putting a bullet in somebody's brain is forgiving, you did it. Good job. No big deal. It's not impossible,
Absolutely. So what would you say if you're talking to somebody who's been through, maybe not exactly what you've been through, but who's been through abuse, who's been through trauma, who has those issues with vulnerability, trust, what relationship advice would you give them?
I wouldn't. I would say it's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. And it's not your fault. That's what I would say. And we all have our own path to go down, and we all have whatever we need to learn to have the relationship we're supposed to have. And I would say just to take it easy on yourself. Be gentle with yourself. Be kind with yourself. Yet be firm with yourself and lean in, lean forward and march forward. You got this. You got this. You can heal. Seek your path. Follow your heart. That's what I would say.
So what would you say to that person that hasn't gone through the trauma, just your average Joe or Jane? What's your relationship advice to them?
I would say something that we say in our house, right? We are kind to each other. Why would I say anything other than kindness and care and love? Why would I act in any other way than that to the people that are closest to me in my life, right? They're my very best people. They're my favorite people. And I know sometimes it can be difficult, especially through COVID, and we just get used to each other and we start to take each other for granted. And maybe we might start using harsh words and saying unkind things. That's not okay. That's never okay, right? We need to treat our people that live in our home with us, as good or better than those people that we want to impress when we go out to dinner, right? And it doesn't mean we can't be open and vulnerable and honest, but we must practice kindness, with the people in our home.
I think that is wonderful advice. So I don't want to keep you too much longer. However, I have to take a minute to talk tattoos with you because I love tattoos. I have a lot of tattoos. You have a lot of tattoos and you give tattoos. So tell me, what is the favorite or most meaningful tattoo that you have?
When my daughter turned 8, I told her she could tattoo anything she wanted on me as long as she drew it herself. So she drew a SpongeBob SquarePants when she was 8 years old, and we put a tattoo machine in her hand. And my shop manager at the time and a couple of they were terrified that she was actually accidentally going to poke herself. Me and her were having fun. She was surrounded by people just watching her and making sure she was okay as she tattooed the SpongeBob SquarePants on my leg. And when we walked away from the shop, we went to go get some ice cream afterwards. And she said, "Dad, I feel really full of myself, but in a good way." And I said, "That's good, kid. You deserve it." Right? That is my favorite tattoo that I have.
That is the coolest favorite tattoo story I have ever heard. What's your favorite tattoo that you have given?
About 10 years ago, maybe. Something like that. One of the brothers in recovery approached me about wanting to do a tattoo for a survivor. There was a girl at the Salvation Army downtown in San Diego who had a tattoo on her hip that had happened during a sexual assault when she was 14 years old. And after that sexual assault, she had run away, gotten on drugs, ended up on the street, ended up all the way out here in San Diego, homeless and doing tricks and all that kind of stuff. So they asked if I would maybe tell them what it would cost to pitch in for her to get the tattoo done. I just did it for free. And I covered that god awful tattoo with some angel wings for her. And that's the most meaningful tattoo I've ever been able to do. And that's where my career is going. It's messed up with COVID right now. But I've already been volunteering with a couple of different organizations covering human trafficking marks and things of that nature. And that's where my career gets to go. You know, I get to eliminate that stuff and help people have a fresh start. You know,
That's pretty cool. How does that make you feel?
it feels good. You know, feels. It's hard to describe what it feels like to be able to do that. You know, when sometimes when we rescue other people, we're rescuing ourselves too. You know.
Absolutely. So, where can people find you if they're not already following you, which would be hard to imagine, but where can people find you on social media if they want a copy of the book? Tell people how to find you.
So I have a website, forrestlang.com. It's Forrest with 2 R's. And then mostly I just, use the Instagram. I haven't figured out the other platforms yet, but the Instagram handle I have for the book stuff is Angel Blue Book. I tend to like stutter or like spit it out too quick. So that's why I said it slow. The word angel followed by the word blue and then the word book on Instagram. That's the easiest way to reach me. Drop a comment. I always check like the DMs too, like the message requests, because if you're not following people, I don't know why let them message you, but I always check that too. So I give a shit if you want to talk to me or you want to ask me something or you want me to email you a PDF of the book, you got it.
And I was going to say, you are super responsive on social media. It's clear that you care about people. You look at those comments, you look at the messages, you actually reply. And your Instagram is really motivational and inspirational. So I think if you're not following Forrest, now is the time to definitely do that. And Instagram, I think, is the way everybody's going anyway, maybe Twitter as well, but
I can't keep up, man.
yeah, so much going on, so much going on. Well, Forrest, I really appreciate your time today. I hope that our audience has gotten as much out of this talk as I have. I think the biggest thing that I take away is it's not your fault, and treat people with kindness. So thank you so much, Forrest, for your time today. I really appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. It's been an honor.
I really enjoyed talking to Forrest today. I think the information and the advice he gave can really benefit every single one of us. I hope you feel the same way. Well, until next week, remember, you are strong enough and you are worth it.